My friends, we are back again. We got a cool wine tonight. My dad got this one, slipping under my nose. Now, I don't know the grape in this one. I don't know the grape because it just says wine of Greece, but I'm guessing because they're calling it Gino, that it's probably Gino Mavro, which is a very, I want to say famous because a lot of you guys probably haven't heard of it. But as far as red grapes grow in Greece, because Greece is not a country that uses a lot of international grapes like Cabernet, like Merlot. They have a lot of their local indigenous varietals. But Gino Mavro is one that's probably in like a mid tier. You don't have to be some sort of wine nerd really necessarily to know about Gino Mavro. Not necessarily. So let's try it. It's good. It's actually got like a little bit of a richness, like a meatiness to it, which is kind of, and like a honeyness too. Actually, you get a lot of honey from Greek wines, which is very interesting. Kind of reminds me of how I like to imagine they used to be back in the day. Although, if we're being honest, guys, I've read about wine throughout the ages, and most of the wine during that Greek period was watered down. You didn't usually drink it. You didn't really usually drink wine when it was full. That was considered to be like an alcoholic thing to do. Most people would just put water in it. And remember, the wines weren't even as strong in general back then because you didn't have engineered yeast. So, it was a very different kind of style. And also because the wine would spoil very easily, what you saw a lot, actually what you saw almost universally, is that they would put all sorts of weird, disgusting stuff like sap and like pine needles and stuff, like anything to try to preserve it long. Because with the exception of when the wine was initially fermented, which would be kind of like a Beaujolais Nouveau, within months of that it would start to degrade, even if they did store it in amphorae. So it's kind of interesting. The only wines from back then that you could say are somewhat, because we didn't really have wine the way that we like to think of it until, wine today is very heavily engineered, but it didn't start to become kind of like this until the monks and the monasteries began to really, and of course when we got corks from Portugal, right? Then that was really the 1400s with Britain. So corks really transformed everything in wine. But last little thought on wine. There's only wines from the ancient era that are sort of considered today to be somewhat replicable would be sweet dessert wines, like Pantallerias and stuff that you would get from Sicily or from southern Italy, because the wine was very, very sweet, and as a result, it could preserve for a long period of time. So it's kind of interesting. So those are the only ones that maybe we have some sort of similarity to. And the Romans talked a lot about, they lauded the sweet wines as being the best, whereas the rest was just kind of like anything to keep it together. All right, that ends the wine portion of our Periscope. Not the drinking of the wine portion, but the talking of it. All right, let's go into dating. So, is frame important after banging a girl, or is it just as important before? And should you set boundaries before banging? Okay. So this brings up something that I think is really important to be said. Before I answer that I got a lot of Anglo in me. Yeah, I got a lot of Anglo in me. WASP heritage on my father's side. Also some Irish, German. Theoretically Italian, although the DNA doesn't test for that anymore. Which doesn't make any sense. But anyway, so talking about frame, before I get into this exact question itself about the importance of frame before and after, because there's a whole thing there. But we got to say first, okay, we need to stop looking at frame as like, is it important to have frame at this point? Should I have frame at this point? You should always have frame. You should always have frame. Frame isn't a tactic. Frame is a way of life. Frame is something that you're constantly developing. It is your mental fortitude. That's what it is. It's your mental fortitude. So you don't say like, okay, well I can have no mental fortitude now because I did this. Then that's not how a really attractive, a really alpha. It's not how an alpha guy is gonna talk, guys. Alpha guys don't do that. So from that perspective, it's the wrong question because you always want to have frame. Now, that said, let's talk about it in the context of hooking up versus post hookup. Well, one of the things, and this is no disrespect to my, my game friends out there, guys who are single and picking up girls. I think that they will, frankly, I think the honest ones will admit this. But the reality is that hooking up with a girl, the frame required for hooking up with a girl, is far less than required to be in a relationship with her. Because when you hook up with a girl, you can play to very specific, sexual triggers, and you can create a fantasy, and you do only have to really hold frame throughout that interaction, and then you can be done with her. You don't have to navigate the deeper psychological issues of sort of melding together with somebody and navigating that when you lose the power of as much fantasy. Because even if you are amazing to her and she loves and appreciates you and she's so attracted to you, which is what should happen in a relationship, but it's not going to be a fantasy anymore, because she's going a fantasy. I saw some people the other day who were saying like, "Oh, you wish that you were a fantasy, that you wish you were a fantasy." I guess because you're saying that women, only like the fantasy version of you after the first couple of weeks. I guess that you just don't know how to stay being a fantasy. It's like, no, you just don't understand what the fuck fantasy means. Like, you don't know what the definition of that word means. Like, it doesn't mean that she's not still attracted to you. It doesn't mean that she doesn't still think that you're the best thing that happened to her life or whatever. It means that you're not some sort of imagined entity. It's not some sort of thing based on a need that needs to be fulfilled. So in a relationship, if you want to have a good relationship, it requires a very, very strong frame over a long period of time. And that's why you see a lot of guys who got really hard into pickup, like, for instance, Neil Strauss, right? Rivellino's, and again, who knows if Neil was just going through a fight when that picture he posted the other day had been taken. But, Neil Strauss not looking so good in his relationship, looking a little weak in the relationship, looking a little like he's trying to make things right. And I didn't read his new book. I've heard mixed things. I've heard good things about it, and which I think the book was called like The Truth, and it was supposed to. But I think there was actually like, from what I heard about the book, it basically goes through his breakdown when he was kind of escaping in the game, which people do, and then really finding true connection. But the problem is that my guess is that a lot of the stuff that Neil probably didn't have his full frame built up, and so he got into a relationship, and he's not. Let's just say he's not quite as strong mentally as he needs to be. And look, guys, I'm not going to tell you that like I had it figured out from day one. I'm not going to tell you I don't have more work to do. That would be a lie. Like, I'm constantly working on it. And Hector Beeman, who you guys should all be following, I think he's dropping some really hot shit. Hello from New Jersey. It's good to see you. He's the first to say that your frame, it's always something you're working on. So just be aware that if you want to hook up with a girl, you can fake having frame. You can fake having frame, and there are certain let's just say philosophies of game that are actually based on just kind of faking having game. But eventually you can't do that, and it's going to be found out. So you should have frame all the time, of course, but in a relationship it will certainly be more work if you want to keep seeing her. Okay, if promiscuity is bad for a woman, how can you gain experience? And especially if especially since promiscuous women are toxic, is it worth it? All right, this is a really good question, and we get into a lot of gray area here. I don't want you guys to think that I have. This is not something that you can just say a hard and fast rule on. At what point when you're dating a girl that you don't want to be with seriously, and she likes you, and she likes you more than you like her, at what point are you being unethical? At what point? Anyone who says that's an obvious answer, that there's like an obvious answer to that, is full of shit. It's full of shit. One of the reasons I got out of game was because I felt like I had been hurting women. and it wasn't like a white knight kind of thing, but I actually just I didn't like breaking things off with girls. I didn't like the process. It didn't feel good. Didn't feel good seeing things end with them. And I also felt guilty. I felt guilty because I felt like maybe I had kept this thing going for much longer, and I didn't really want that. I didn't really want what she wanted. That said, with a lot of girls, it was okay. It's all right, man. You we're only like one question in. We're on the second question of like 8 questions, so you got plenty to go here. But with other girls, I'd be seeing them for a couple of months, and in some ways I handled it better. There's more honesty involved, and we understood that we weren't going to work on either end, but there was no wasted time because we had taught each other things. And so this is the sort of heuristic that I use. And this is very, very much, it's not like a rule book thing that you can check so many boxes here. Okay. First thing though, is you don't want to lie to her. You don't want to lie to her. You don't have to tell her everything off the bat, because it's fair to try to feel out the situation. And also, just being honest, I mean, if you tell a girl everything off the bat, you can really kill attraction. It's one of the reasons why a lot of guys who have integrity don't do as well with women, is because women, to a certain extent, they like to be gamed to an extent, and you have to figure out to what extent is the game enriching her life, and to what extent is it taking away from her. I can tell you that there are certain girls who, it's like there was when I was still really in this, like, I got to be really, like, I don't want to mislead them, that if a girl is expressing interest in me, I'd be like, hey, look, I don't really know if I really want anything serious. And she'd kind of still be going after me, and I'd be like, but I don't know if I want this to, like, I just want you to understand that. And she was eventually just like, shut up. It's like, I'm an adult woman. I can make my own decisions. And that was a real big lesson for me. And, part of the white knight tendency is this thing to rescue a woman, even from herself. And I do think that there are cases where, you need to cut a girl off because she's completely in over her head and she's lost perspective. But you also need to remember that she is an adult, and you can't just make every decision for her. You can tell her how you feel and what you want, and if it doesn't align with her, she can take it or leave it. And for a time, a lot of times with women, they're going to continue to hook up with you, but they're not gonna like it, and they're gonna get more resentful. And if they get more resentful, thank you for that super hard. I appreciate that. If they get more resentful, then you really end it, right? Now, if you're dealing with a woman who's really immature, then you should cut it off very, very early. But remember that this process of, like, there are plenty of women out there who are not necessarily like promiscuous whores, right? It's not like that they're just necessarily toxic, but everybody has their own growing process. They all have their own process of growth, and for you as a guy to, like, don't try to, like be honest about what you're doing, but don't feel the need so much to try to control hers. And this is all gray area, guys. It's all gray areas. So the point here is that you really need to, like, focus on what is your intention. And if your intention going into interactions with girls is to be honest and not to hurt them, you can very often level with a girl about that, and she can appreciate it, and she'll hook up with you. A lot of times she'll hook up with you. Sometimes she won't, but she'll respect you. And you just create good vibes among everybody. And that's actually a function of really strong frame, because if you have really strong frame, you can tell a woman the complete truth about your intentions. And, again, maybe not at the very beginning, because it's tactically kind of ridiculous, but once you guys are, like, vibing, you can tell them that, hey, look, this is just so you understand where I'm at. And, unless you were deceiving her from the beginning, she shouldn't expect, if you're in a certain cultural context, right? Like, if you are, okay, let's talk about context here, because this is also relevant. If you're, like, in New York City and you're dating, and you go and you hook up with a girl, it's your second date. After your second date, you guys go, she comes back to your place, you have sex. You having this conversation with her before that would be kind of ridiculous. In that context, it's somewhat expected, right? And if she wasn't a girl who wanted to be in that situation, she wouldn't have gone back to your place on the second date. Okay. Now, if you are in a evangelical community where everybody is only doing anal before marriage, I'm being an asshole, but that is actually a very common thing in evangelical communities. No, but in like a real evangelical community where with a girl who isn't going that direction, who she's looking for something more serious, you're not going to want to sleep with her. You're not going to want to sleep with her before you, because her, in that context, her expectation is that, well, that's probably, I mean, that would only happen in marriage. Definitely wouldn't happen unless you guys were going to be together in a relationship. And to be fair, it's likely a lot on her end that she would not do it until you were in a relationship. But just to give you an idea of all this, like, there is a context to what you do, because the context determines the expectations. So what are the expectations? If I'm at a club in Ibiza and it's late at night, I'm not going to tell her, hey, look, I don't want anything serious. I just want you to know that. Like, she would laugh at you. It would be ridiculous. I don't know what it's like to date in the gay scene. When I was really, really early on in the coaching, I did work with a gay guy, because at that point I hadn't, I guess I knew him, and so I decided to, it was early in my business, so business is business when you're starting off. I wouldn't do it now because that scene is very different. It's a very different scene, and I think you have to understand all the nuance of that scene. So, but I think it's pretty tough to find something serious there. But not to be judgmental and not to stereotype too much, but the vast majority of people in that scene have open relationships. I'd say it's minimum half, but I think it's probably closer to 3/4 have open relationships. And so, all right, moving on here. What is tension? Can you show by example how holding it is key? Okay. Well, what is tension? So the question is in the context of escalation and sexual tension, and how it's very important for escalation. But what does tension feel like? Did you guys think that the screen froze? You guys think that this broadcast is freezing because I'm slowing it down? Tension is really space. It's really space in interaction. And in that space, energy is created. And so the big problem that guys make when they're starting off, I've said this before, this is the one thing that Nick Sparks taught me that, like, it moved me from beginner to intermediate. Like, it was so simple. But it was just about holding space. And what was great about it was that you have all this stuff about a routine, and you have to say this, you have to say this. You don't actually. There's good stuff to understanding the sort of mystery method, basic kind of structure of interaction. I think that's really useful. It's really useful. And I talk about all this stuff in depth in the masterclass. But the really important thing about holding space is how simple it is. It's one of the reasons why a guy who doesn't speak the language of another girl can have like a really strong tension and polarity with her, can have a real attraction. And I've tried this on dates where, like, I didn't feel like the connection was super great, but I was like, well, you know what, let's just practice holding space. And you could still close, you could still make out with them and everything, you could still, like, you could take him back even. Now, getting a follow-up date would be very difficult, but in that moment you could create enough tension that there was a desire for a resolution. Because, and this is why guys are like, I'm really nervous to approach. It's like, no, you're really excited to approach. You're really excited because it's the same energy. I'm really anxious about this. No, it's just, it's something that's really interesting to you, right? It's something that's really important. You're really amped up. You're amped up for this. Hey, hi from Philly, just across the river. So the point, right? What's the point? The point is that it's very simple. And there were nights that I would go out. I was just like kind of in my head, and I would just go and talk to a girl. I'd be like, "Hey, what's going on? My name's Pat. So, drinking a gin and tonic. Look at that. You know, like boring, fucking boring. But the girl would kind of look at you, and then she kind of look away, and then she kind of look back, like, is this? And then right as she'd be kind of on the way of pulling out, I'd say something else, and she'd pull her right back in. So you can use it in the opener, but the real important part about tension is escalation, right? It's whenever you're escalating, but usually when you're escalating from when you first start getting physical with a girl, that's when it starts to really make the move, right? That's when it starts to really matter the most. So different styles of opener, but I think it's pretty universal when it comes to escalating smoothly sexually. All right, go in the qualifiers more. It's very open-ended. Okay, well, qualifiers are things that you will say that you will and a girl. You're qualifying her whether she is whether she's up to your standards, so to speak. It comes from the mindset that you're the prize, right? You're the prize. Now, look, I want to just mention here briefly subcommunication, because remember, if you are so adamant about trying to qualify her, if you're very overt and over the top about it, you're going to subcommunicate that you're not actually, like, you are qualifying yourself. This is why subcommunication is very important, because you can actually send the opposite signal to her that you want. I was actually talking to a client just before this, and he sent some girl a message. He was saying she's funny, and he was like, "Oh, you're funny, huh? Well, challenge accepted. I'm gonna, like." And then he was saying like, "Why don't you tell me some like a funny joke, right?" So it was this whole thing, but it was like, and he's learning. He's learning. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. But he's learning, but it's not a good game. It's not a good game, right? And it's not a good game because it's over the top. It's over the top, and the subcommunication is like, oh, challenge accepted. It's like, well, now you've just elevated her to your level, right? So qualifying a woman, a lot of it's very implicit. Like, it's not like, you don't say hello, like, I'm just wondering, are you up to my standards, right? Now you can say a comment like that, kind of like quasi tongue in cheek, at a certain point in the interaction, where it would be true, but obviously you're making light of it, but you're also serious, and that could land. But if you were to like go up to a girl and say that, if you didn't have really rock solid body language, which again is subcommunication, it would come across as like autistic, right? It'd be very strange. So it's more like you're like, oh, that's interesting. Like, so tell me about that. Like, so why did you do that? And so you don't want to necessarily go so much to the sense that you're grilling them, because then that can kill attraction. But if she says she does something, like challenging her and like teasing her about stuff, right? These are qualifications. And you put her in a position where she needs to prove herself to you, not vice versa. And that's how you control the frame, right? It takes us back to our initial question. Qualifiers are important for the frame, and I think that the one thing that is universal about beginners with game versus guys who've really internalized everything is that the sort of expert people, they qualify naturally, and not over the top. They just qualify naturally because they understand that a woman is not worth, like, just because she's cute doesn't mean anything. Like, if you've internalized the fact that you have abundance, that you have options, you're not going to be excited about just a girl who's attractive, because you could get a girl who's attractive. It doesn't matter. And you can say that to her at a certain point in the interaction, or online. It works very well online. One of Hector's things, right, is like, looks are common, but and that's very important, because women are used to guys simping over their looks. They're like, oh my god, this guy's like the guy just sees an attractive girl, and that's a mindset in you that like needs to be killed. It needs to be killed, and it's one of the things like I have to work on really seriously with clients, because we can talk about different tactics, but if that mindset keeps coming out, like I got to get this girl, I got to get her, I got to hook up with her, it's like, man, that's like sabotage. It's like if you have like an army, it's like sabotage. Like someone's like like breaking the equipment. Like it's just destroying everything on the inside. Like you're not able to fight a proper battle, quote unquote, against her, because everything is in disarray internally. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers that with qualifiers. So all right, let's get another little bit of extra, little extra here. I'm really liking this, by the way. I haven't had Greek wine in such a long time, so I'm excited. All right. In a long-term relationship, she asks if she's good enough for you. What's the best response? Well, I'll answer this one first. Hey, Pat, question. Should I read the mystery method, or is it superficial PUA BS? All right, I'm going to tell you, I have not read the mystery method. I know, don't tell Rivellino I have not read the mystery method. I was actually tempted to read it, though, because everything that everybody has done when it comes to pickup is based off the mystery method. So it's kind of like if you're talking about, reading philosophy, it's like, I don't want to read Plato, right? It's like, well, everything is kind of based off of referencing Plato. And even if you don't read Plato, you are engaging with Plato's arguments, because everybody else's arguments are somehow connected to them. So I think it's very similar with that. Now, I've read Plato in college. It's been a long time since I've read Plato. And I haven't read the mystery method, but I obviously know the system. I do think that mystery, unfortunately, its reputation kind of got sullied for a couple of reasons. One, RSD stole his content because they had a much better marketing machine. Mystery was like more of an artist. He was literally an artist. And by the way, this little side point here, understand the difference between pickup artists and pickup technicians. Okay. There are like people like Goldman, like he's an artist, right? He's an artist. A lot of guys you get in this stuff they're much more logical minds. Not that Mystery wasn't logical himself, but my point here is that they can be very, very technical about everything, and it takes them much longer time to put their own personal expression onto it. So Mystery had a lot of emotional issues, and I think also the peacocking thing. He was a magician, right? The peacocking thing was a bit much, and it didn't scale into the mainstream. And one of the things, not that everything scaled into the mainstream, but I think you know what I mean. Even mainstream pickup, even though the principle of peacocking was accurate and people acknowledge it as such, he's kind of been caricatured because of the peacocking. But remember, for Mystery, who was a magician, peacocking was actually his peacocking was congruent. Coming out with top hats and spider rings and stuff like that. That was congruent. For a regular person, it's ridiculous. I did peacock once just to do it because I felt like I had to do it. This was back over a decade ago, and this is ridiculous. I mean, I felt absolutely ridiculous. So everything's about congruence. Okay, so all that said, Rivellino recommends it, and I think that there's if you are not a Spurg who's going to take everything literally and you're going to try to follow everything, every single little like mimicry about who he is and try to put that on there. Like, you need to take your own individual identity and integrate it into the system. But his system is, I mean, I got to tell you guys, I am not somebody who likes to follow systems. I'm someone who likes to nitpick and take what's best and leave the rest. But, I mean, Mystery's structure of attraction, comfort, seduction is unbeatable. Like, there is not anyone who tells you that that is not correct is wrong. And I've tried to like test other ways of doing it. That is always how the sequence goes. Even if you're not aware of how certain stuff occurred, that's always how the sequence goes. And so you understanding that and understanding his case studies, which are phenomenal, can be really valuable so long as you don't get caught up in like, am I in, comfort one right now? Or am I in, so long as you don't get so caught up in those details that you lose the moment, because I think it's much more relevant for you to read it maybe and then go out and just do approaches and get the experience of being in those situations, and then or do that and then read the book, and then just so that you have this feedback between experience and theories so that you can start to cross-reference it. If you just consume information, you're not really growing. It's all about it. It's all about experimentation. It's all about going out and experimenting and then seeing what other people have done and then cross-referencing to like help you get through blocks. That's why coaching's great, right? Because you get like, you're out doing things and then you get the cross-reference. Like, oh, I had this problem. Oh no, this is what happened. Oh my God. Like you save yourself an enormous amount of time. So anyway, what was the next question? All right, let's go back to that long-term relationship question. In a long-term relationship, she asks if she's good enough for you. What's the best response? She doesn't think she's enough. Okay. Now, this is going to be one that's probably going to get some mixed responses, so I want to make sure I'm clear. I don't think it's a good sign when a woman says she isn't enough for you. This is a little bit different than a woman not being in your frame, than a woman being in your frame. A woman being in your frame is that she understands and respects your value, and she surrenders to you, right? She knows she's got a good thing. She wants to please you. She wants you to feel appreciated and respected. But for her to diminish herself like that, now some guys will say that's great. That's how you really know you've got her in the frame. But there's a red flag there to me, because the red flag is her self-esteem. And that means that if she doesn't think she's good enough for you, it's not good. It's not good, because in the long term, she's going to try to push you away, or she's going to start to lower. She's going to push you away, but what's going to happen is that she's going to start to lower her own. She's going to start to lower your value. This is what happens when you date an insecure girl. She's like, why are you with me? That's how it starts off. It's like, you're so great. Why are you with me? And then it evolves into, you can't be so great because you're with me. Because she has to reconcile this dissonance. Really attractive guy likes me who's a piece of shit or who's nothing special. So that has to be reconciled in one direction or another. And now one of the ways you could reconcile it is to bring her up, and you can try to do that. And to an extent, that's a normal thing, right? To an extent, helping a woman to see what's wonderful about her I call it deep game. It's one of the things that I did with girls. Let's just say some of my experiments were not so great when I wasn't committed to her, because I'd make her feel great about herself, but then I wouldn't be with her, and the subcommunication was bad there, because then I was actually making her feel worse. So use it with caution outside of a committed relationship, but building your partner up is an important thing. It's a great thing. However, how much is really, if she's saying things like, I'm not good enough for you, why are you with me? That's a really big warning sign about where things are going. It's different if she says something like that in the moment of fantasy in the beginning. But if she starts to really believe like, you're just much better than me, I have to, like, she's going to try to destroy it one way or another. So I'm not a fan of it. Let's just say I'm not a fan of that situation. I'm not saying it's you got to work on her self-esteem if you want to stay in it. Okay, choosing virginity till marriage for non-religious reasons. Well, cool if you want to do it. I mean, this is frame, right? You do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. But here's one thing I'll say to the people who are saving themselves until marriage. Not having sex with a girl does not mean that, well, first off, I have to say the demographics of that could be difficult, because you're going to be harder pressed to find women who aren't going to do that. unless you're in a specific community. So consider that, because if you're in a secular, hookup culture, and you say you're saving yourself until marriage, you are not going to find a lot of matches. So now, and also the matches you find are not going to be other virgins, right? So, maybe some roasty who's been through the meat grinder is gonna say, okay, I'll wait for you. Like, yeah, but she didn't wait for like the other guys. So, and again, I'm very nuanced about that stuff. But just to give you an idea, if you're trying to save yourself until marriage, I recommend that you find a community for it. Doesn't have to be that the religion is what does it, but you're going to want to find someone in a community that has congruent values in action, if not in intellectual specifics. Now, but the fundamental thing here is like, just because you're being a virgin, it doesn't mean that this is the biggest thing that guys who are like more conservative make as a mistake. Just because you are going that direction doesn't mean that you don't want to trigger the same visceral attraction in a woman that you would if you were going to sleep with her. Okay? And what people do is that they try to shut down all the sexual energy because it scares them. They want to be a virgin, so the sexual energy is the enemy. So let's kill that. And that's the recipe for a really stale dynamic. You don't want to do that. You want her to be so... Mom, go back inside. It's not the right part of the conversation, especially I want my mom out here for. You want her to be like ready to go, like so aroused and so ready to take you. Like she's not to take you, but she's going to want you so badly because you've created so much sexual tension in her, but you're the one who controls the release, right? And that's the recipe for really higher level frame control. So I'll check out some of these before I go on to the next questions. How to lure... I saw something about luring women into a basement. I like to lure women from Tinder into my basement. Well, official Paul O'Grady, good, watch out for the police. I'm married. I am in a relationship. I'm married. Friends with benefits like you less when I was securing. That's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that, Ben. I've got a lot of yeah, I can understand this mostly. Anyway, whatever. Away from the Spanish stuff here. Okay. This is an interesting question. So, great connection with the girl. It's romantic, but there's no visceral physical attraction. Not really his type. She's got a more of way you described it was sort of like a thicker, squarish kind of build. I think that he was probably being a little unkind. From what I understood, what he was trying to say though was that she still had like a figure, but her frame was larger, where he was used to more slender women in the past. She could be feminine though, in a very much in a childlike way. Is this a problem? Do I have to get her naked? Will it be different after I get her naked? Well, look, man, I don't know. Don't send me the pics, but I mean, I'm not gonna know how you're gonna feel different naked if I don't even seen her at all. How am I gonna know that? But look, let's take a step back here. Okay, sounds like there's a bit of the Madonna whore complex going on here. You have a woman. I don't think it's just physical. I think it's that this woman's energy is probably much more the kind that you feel like you have like a psychological connection with, and that you just feel like you feel drawn to her and you like to do things with her, you like to be with her, but she's not arousing you like maybe a whore archetype woman that you've been with in the past. And by the way, for those listening, but not a whore complex, I'm not saying that all women who are more on the whore, in fact, I think integration of those two sides of a woman is essential. But because that's what a great relationship is. You want to have a woman be in touch with her whore energy without being necessarily a whore, but you want her to be in touch with that whore energy. I remember, actually, as a digression, I remember as like in high school, I remember reading the newspaper, this old guy, and there's some sort of, I forget exactly, it was in the newspaper, and someone asked him about whether you should marry a dirty girl or marry a clean girl, I mean, more of a modest girl, and he basically said, like, marry the modest girl and turn her into a dirty girl. Right? That was his way of putting it. Bring out the whore and the good girl. And I think it can go either direction. There's an account on Twitter. I haven't seen from him in a bit. I don't know whether that there's some sort of shadow banning going on, but it's called the Honest Misogynist. Um, he's got that, what's that fat comedian who was really, I forget his name right now, but incredibly died a couple of years back. But that's his avatar, right? At any rate, point of this is that he was talking about turning a hoe into a housewife. Okay. And a lot of guys, I loved it because I love, counter narrative stuff. And this was counter narrative. So he was going against a lot of like hardcore red pill stuff and was saying like, yeah, if you have the right frame, you can basically turn a hoe into a housewife. And I agree with him. If you can get past her past, which was something we're going to be talking about in one of the later questions here, but that's exactly what you want. That's like you're bringing out the Madonna in the whore, right? You're turning her into a girl who can be stable and can be great, but also still has a lot of that whore energy. More common and probably safer is to go for the Madonna and bring out the whore in her. Now, are you going to get equal 50-50? Almost certainly not. But you can get a solid 60-40. You get a 70-30. I think that after that, you start to get too much of a one-dimensional attitude. But the point here is to try to aim for a balanced integration. So, okay. So the relevance here about this girl, I'm sure that the looks are part of it, and looks don't help, but there's plenty of drop-dead gorgeous women who are not in the whore archetype. Hey, here's a great one. You remember John F. Kennedy, who was killed by the CIA? But remember John F. Kennedy's wife, Jackie Kennedy? Remember Marilyn Monroe? And how women wanted to be one of those too back in the 60s, 50s, 60s. Women wanted to be Jackie Kennedy or they wanted to be Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn Monroe is the whore and Jackie Kennedy was Madonna. And both were gorgeous. And actually, I think Jackie Kennedy was probably more attractive than Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe wasn't, in my perspective, she wasn't really my thing, wasn't really my thing. But the point of this is that it's not about her looks, it's about her energy. And, I think a lot of guys who are being really honest with themselves will probably even say that the really hottest girls are usually the Madonna because they are not as used to their sexual energy. So they are more likely to try to compensate for it with looking better. Guys, what I'm just dropping right here is really, really serious shit. Okay? A lot of times the most beautiful women are more in the Madonna side of the spectrum than the whore side of the spectrum. Because they will overcompensate with their looks and thinking that's without having to go into the energetic portion of it. This is really, really big stuff. So you guys know, right? Like everyone's like, oh, his wife got fat and he cheated on her with this hotter, younger woman. That's not what happens. Maybe maybe the CEO sleeps with the secretary who's trying to climb the ladder and she's more attractive maybe than his wife just because she's 20 years younger. But these women are not bombshells. They're cute, right? This is accurate statistically and anecdotally. When men cheat, it's not usually with a more attractive woman because that woman has a portion that has been not given by the wife, right? He's actually usually still with the wife, not just because of the children or whatever, the assets, but because she's actually more attractive. But the whore has the energy that the Madonna doesn't. Okay. So I think that assuming that the looks are not going to be the big issue for him, and maybe they are. Maybe a lot of this is just the physical build, but if that's not the issue, then I would focus on trying to bring out the horror in her. I think it's great to have that kind of connection, but not having any real attraction. I mean, uh, horror energy is very, very serious. It's very, very crazy, crazy energy. The arousal that it gives the guys. You don't need that. You don't need to get that necessarily. You don't need to get that necessarily in the person that you're going to commit with. So long as you're attracted to them and you enjoy sex with them, you want to have sex with them. So I think that the main variable here for this guy is how attractive is this woman really? Because if she's not attractive enough, he's going to put her in the friend zone. All right, we got 2 more questions here. Attracting women. Hold on, gotta take the sip. These are getting longer and longer. You guys are asking me a lot of questions. Attracting women of similar frequencies. How to get high self-esteem from women who surrender. Well, I can probably answer this one a bit faster because you will naturally attract women in the same vibration as you. You're naturally going to do it. You don't have to think about it. Now, here's a relevant point, though. If you have a pocket that you have not integrated, if you have a pocket of need that you haven't addressed, a woman who could be very low vibration, you will be drawn to her because of that pocket that you need to deal with. And this is why I'm very pro guys kind of jumping in the quicksand with their rope, right? I got your rope, man, but jump in the quicksand. It's important because this is an opportunity for them to deal with that pocket. And that's why, like, one of my exes, she was like crazy, crazy. But she actually taught me a lot about myself. I learned so much from her. I couldn't be doing the job I'm doing today without her. I learned so much about the female shadow, but also the male shadow from that dynamic. So the point here is that you're going to attract women of the same frequency as you mostly, but if you have a pocket that's really unresolved, you're going to get pulled into that. And by the way, guys, this is very connected to the Madonna whore issue, because if you have pockets, you're going to find the draw of the whore is going to be very, very strong for most guys. Because the whore energy is kind of a dark energy. And I think that it's okay because we learn and we grow through darkness as much as light. This is not some sort of heretical. I mean, exorcists even talk about how demons are actually like a way to come closer to God. This isn't like a heretical statement. Not that I really care. I mean, I talk about what I want to talk about. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the people who really are closest to God, right, are those who usually found him through the gutter. There's an element here of having to experience darkness to overcome pockets of darkness. Like you have to get in the face of it. And it's true with women. So the key thing here is learning and moving through it and not getting stuck. And a high self-esteem woman will, I mean, she will, if she's high self-esteem and she's feminine, she will surrender to you. She'll surrender to you. How should you look to be attractive? LOL, does it matter? Looks definitely matter, man. They definitely matter. As the one thing about pickup literature that was a lie. They say looks don't matter. Now, that said, you don't need to be like a ridiculously good looking person. A lot of the guys who are putting out the stuff today, like, oh my god, I'm so, you have to be like 6'2" and you gotta be white, you gotta be attractive, you gotta look like Pat Stedman to get girls. I'm just joking, guys. But they're talking about how you have to be this amazing like Adonis of a guy to get girls today. These guys are just like, they're just checking out. They don't. they don't want to do the work. They don't want to learn. I've seen plenty of those hot guys. They'll get laid and the girls will ditch them. They're never going to get a girlfriend who really cares about them. They're not going to have frame. So while a lot of this stuff is a lie from the early pickup community about how like morbidly obese 55-year-old guy who lives with his mom, bangs models every weekend, one weird trick, here's how you learn it. Okay, bullshit. But actually, maybe a lot of this is a good lie to believe because it gets you focusing on things that actually really move the needle and can really change your life. So I prefer to hold the truth in a superposition, very quantum, right? This is true. This is also true, and I can do both at the same time. Much better way, I think, of living. So, all right. I've been cocky when a girl was interested, didn't intensify her emotion. How to do it? Okay, well, this is based on a tweet I made about one of the biggest newbie mistakes in game. One of the biggest newbie mistakes, which is to act cocky when a girl's interested instead of pacing her emotion. And I think the distillation here is that when a guy acts cocky, he's if we talk about this is my formula. Okay, when it comes to attraction, you have desire and comfort. And you need to, if you have a desire issue, you need to try to increase the desire without losing too much comfort. And if you have a comfort issue, you need to maintain the desire without, you need to increase the comfort without losing too much desire, right? So it's like a surgery, because usually the impulse is that, oh, I have low comfort, I'm going to throw a bunch of desire stuff out there and be like a real asshole. But then you lose the comfort and you often don't really gain much desire. And then so you actually lower your chances. So you move from the friend zone to being like out of the picture. So the key here is to gradually move the direction to where you want it to go. So being cocky when a girl is interested is an overcompensation. It's an over calibration of desire. If she starts to express interest in you, then starting to really, really go too heavily with the cockiness will have you. It can knock you out of the picture. It can knock you out of the picture. Whereas if she's interested, a guy who's really confident in himself is going to be, instead, he's going to say like, okay, he's going to pace that emotion, right? How does it feel being so attracted to me? Right? How does it feel? And there's some NLP aspects to this, but she's drawn towards you in that moment, and you want to embrace her. And this is something I want to close with this. I mean, I guess I'll answer some other questions if you have them in the chat, but I really want to emphasize this. The problem for guys for really getting good with women and really bringing out a really serious sexual side of a woman is that guys shame women. And this is one thing that, again, like, look, message over messenger. There are a lot of women, like a lot of the mainstream stuff about women is stop slut shaming, okay? Their entire argumentation is ridiculous about how they go about doing it, but you are not going to get a sexual side from a woman if you slut shame her. You're not going to do that because you are actually taking that sexual energy, but you're actually taking that sexual energy and you're suppressing it. You're saying, oh yeah, you've been a slut. Like, I don't want a slut. Fuck you. Like, I don't want a slut in my life. So she's either gonna lie to you. She's lying. She's gonna lie to you. She's not gonna tell you the truth. Guys who are really confident in themselves and who want to bring out that sexual energy in a woman are not gonna shame her for things that she's done in the past. Now, you may not want to commit to her because of things she's done in the past, because maybe she's over, let's say, indulged in that dark energy, and maybe it's something that you want, and that's understandable. But from an attraction standpoint, from an ability to open a woman up, you can't do that. And so if you are going to commit to a woman, you have to accept everything that she's done. You have to accept her shadow, and you have to be okay with it, and you have to, in some ways, even encourage it to come out. That, like, hey, you can express that dark sexual slut energy that she's probably afraid of too. Men are like, a lot of what conditioning today is designed to make men not be violent because it's dark energy. But that's not good, because that energy just comes out in repressed, ridiculous ways. Whereas as a guy, if you are really, really aligned with that dark energy, if you're just like, hey, like, yeah, I have the capacity to kill people, and therefore I don't need to do it. Like, I'm okay with experiencing that energy, therefore I don't need to let it control me. And that's the same kind of stuff that you can do with a woman's sexual energy. And if you allow her to open up about that, where she can share her fantasies, and you don't let your ego take it personally, you're going to alpha widow her. You're never going to have a guy like that again. A guy who she's attracted to, but also makes her feel safe on a super, super deep emotional level. Safe with even her darkest stuff, right? Don't be so serious. Let her express it. Just because why should you feel it subcommunicates insecurity that you care about it so much. Now you can make your decision about her, but when it comes to how you interact with her, it's not like this thing where, like, guys get so upset, they get so petulance. You want me to smile? It's a shit test. I'm not gonna smile. I'm not gonna smile for you. I'm not smiling for anybody here, huh? I'm not smiling for anybody. All right, guys. Do we have any more questions? Any more questions here? Any more questions? Oh, no, I smiled. Look at that. I failed the shit test. Can't be happy. Can't be happy here. Are there certain... I don't even care if this person is serious. This is a weird person. I'm just going to mute him. Where to start diagnosing daddy issues? Where to start diagnosing daddy issues? Well, guys, where to start diagnosing daddy issues? If a woman is looking for you, if she's looking for you to control everything, if she's looking for you to control everything in her life, there's probably some daddy issues there. It's you want a woman to surrender to you, but there's a certain aspect of, like, age plays a factor into this, but like an immaturity aspect. And I think one of the weird things that occurs is that because women look up to authority figures, if you're a much older guy and you're dating a much older woman, you're going to naturally fall into this to an extent. And it's okay for you to enjoy the sexual aspect of that. It's okay for you to enjoy that. But there is a sort of role playing going on. I think it's complicated. Because you do, let's just say that I think it's for a certain kind of dynamic, and I think it can be very sexually charged. But I don't think it's usually quite so psychologically deep, because you have to play a role. Now, some people who are more advanced can compartmentalize that, and they can have a sexual dynamic of sort of daddy-daughter sort of thing. I mean, no one wants to say it's daughter, but that's kind of what's going on. But then outside of that, they can then shut that off. And that's very advanced. I mean, that's advanced relationships, and that's wonderful. But I don't talk about it a lot because it's not relevant for a lot of people, and it can just kind of confuse them. Are there certain cases where sleeping with coworkers is reasonable? I don't think it's really smart, man. Trey, I don't think it's really smart. I'm not going to say that you can't do it. But you're inviting drama. But if you're going to leave the work, I mean, in certain jobs, I mean, it's common. I think 20% of couples have met through work, and God knows how many hookups have occurred from the work environment. I mean, it's proximity. You put men and women next to each other, they're going to hook up. I mean, have you guys heard about women in the army? Let's talk there. So anyway, guys, I think that this was good. I think you guys had a good time tonight, and I will see you guys. I don't know whether tomorrow or the next day for the COVID Cabal one, and we'll have some more of these dating ones next week. Feel free to DM me. I'll record the questions, and we'll take them next time. See ya.